What parents were promised were calm kids and less conflict and better behavior through understanding. But what we actually got was burned out as a parent, always explaining, always needing to be showing up with endless patience. We got guilt. We got a lot of self-doubt in ourselves as parents. And we got kids who struggled with frustration and disappointment and hearing no. Hi, everyone. We're back with season 2 of the Ask Mom Parenting podcast, where we take the mystery and the yelling out of modern parenting and offer real life self-help for parents. I'm Sue, and with me is Randee, and we're here with our no bullshit, no filter, zero guilt parenting reboot. Whether you're deep in the toddler tantrums or navigating tween and teen drama or somewhere in between, you'll get clarity and actionable tools one episode at a time. So moms and dads, there's a new movement happening right now in parenting, and it's buyer's remorse on gentle parenting. There are a lot of parents feeling misled right now, and they've leaned into this idea of over-explaining and validating every feeling. And now they're looking at their preteens and their teens, and they're quietly thinking, I'm not really sure that that worked. What many realize later is that kids were actually craving clearer and more consistent structure. Giving a child constant validation for their developing feelings without a firmly held limit didn't create security. It created anxiety and entitlement and dysregulation, and it left a lot of parents exhausted and second-guessing themselves. The gentle parenting hangover. Why it's losing parents and what actually works long-term. Even the experts have started saying this out loud. A recent Psychology Today article pointed out that emotional validation only approaches don't give parents the clear tools that they're looking for to get long-term behavior changes, especially once kids start really testing the limits. We're also seeing the shift in the headlines. CBS News ran a piece on why more parents are walking away from the gentle approach. Then the Wall Street Journal dropped my favorite headline that pretty much captured the mood. Goodbye, gentle parenting. Hello, fuck around and find out. One of the biggest complaints I hear from parents is that gentle turned into permissive. And then they're left wondering, what do I do when the rules are blurred and that no becomes negotiable? Parents are feeling like they don't have credibility with their kids. If a parenting method requires unlimited time, endless emotional energy, and a perfect self-regulated parent, then it's not sustainable. And when parenting isn't sustainable, families are always left needing more effort, more fixing, and more explaining. Now, this is not to bash gentle parenting, okay? It brought empathy back into the homes where it was missing, and that really matters. But empathy isn't the issue. The issue is what comes after empathy. When real life hits and kids still haven't learned how to handle their limits or disappointment or a difference of opinion. That's what we're talking about today. Changing kids' behavior by becoming what kids actually need most, and that's an adult who's willing to lead. Leadership in parenting does not mean less empathy. It means empathy with direction. It means acknowledging feelings when it's useful, offering validation when it helps, and giving our kids a reality-based gut check that builds their confidence and their personal responsibility. It's that proverbial splash of cold water on their face. That's our job as parents. If you're the parent who is taught that behavior should always be explained instead of trained, and every feeling had to be heard and validated and understood, and now you're looking at your preteen and teen thinking, this did not turn out the way I hoped it would, then stay with us. In parenting, it's honestly never too late to switch up what you're doing and what doesn't work. And with leadership parenting, we keep the long game in mind. It's the big picture while also training the everyday moments.
Yeah, I really love this topic because parents today, and I would include myself in this, really grew up in a time where our parents, really didn't put a lot of emphasis on feelings and frankly, probably just didn't really know how to handle it. For people who might be new, I am a parent of 2 kids. My son will be 8 next month and my daughter is 11. So I very much put myself into these categories when I'm reading these things and we're on these podcasts and talking about things. And I definitely put myself right in the middle of all of that. Actually, very interestingly, I came across an article this morning that has a lot to do with what we're talking about today. Now, it's sort of an opinion piece. It was in something called The Expert Editor. And it was very interesting. It was about this parent who was reflecting on her, I guess, parenting and sort of generalized it. So again, it is a generalization, but I think a lot of us who are parenting young kids today can absolutely agree. She said we raised kids who were emotionally stunted because achievement over awareness was what we were taught, or it was emphasized, I should say. Achievement over awareness was emphasized. She said a lot of people who are parents today, but were kids when she was raising her kids, were successful on paper, but not necessarily for our inner awareness. That the amount of emotional regulation we got was stop crying. And if I could get a nickel for every time I was told that as a kid. So I was like, that I totally relate to that. Like, that's about the extent of what I got growing up. And that, emotional suppression came because our parents really just didn't really know any better. And that feelings were considered problems to solve. And that one really resonated with me because not only did I find that probably to be true, that creeps up in my own parenting today. And, it's sometimes like no matter how far you go in learning new things, it's continuing to learn and educate yourself because the old habits will always kind of creep back up. And I thought that was interesting because I really think that the gentle parenting methods was born out of this need to provide kids with more emotional awareness. And as you mentioned, empathy, it brought empathy back into the homes, which was a really great thing, but it sort of solved one problem. I think it created another for a lot of people. I see a lot of parents online talking about when they took on this approach, feeling like they always had to be emotionally available, or that ultimately they were feeling burnt out and that it neglected their own needs. So I think it did kind of create a new set of problems, and parents are just like, now it's time to get back to just finding a better balance.
Exactly. So let's dial it back a generation or so real quick. Gentle parenting, while it does get a bad rap, it all started with good intentions, like you were saying. Those good intentions then started working against us. Parents are doing everything that they were told. They were told to validate every emotion, and, stay calm at all costs, explain everything endlessly. Yet the tantrum still persisted, and they lasted longer than the phase should have allowed for them to last. Power struggles increased and they stuck around, and the behavior change was slow or non-existent. I can remember a time when our oldest was, I don't know, 4 or 5, and my husband and I are real dichotomy. We are opposites. I'm very do it and be happy I asked early on, and then he was very much about the explain, explain, explain. But there's a time and a place where a 4 and 5-year-old can only understand a snippet of the instruction. And if you're over explaining and you're on their level and you're trying to get into the psyche of this child when you just need the behavior to stop, there's a balance here. There's a way to approach this without the over explanation and the validation. When we're tired and we've been working all day and we're exhausted, having to just tell this 4 and 5-year-old, just get in the bath. So when everything is up for discussion, kids don't know who's in charge, and then they start to feel unanchored. So why did we even need gentle parenting at all? It's because many parents are parenting against their past. They were yelled at. Like, I was yelled at. We've talked about that in earlier podcasts, how to stop yelling. I was yelled at, and now as a result, we overcompensate by over explaining. We were controlled, like for me, it was punished and micromanaged, and now we negotiate everything. And we were ignored emotionally, like you said, stop crying. And now we attach meaning to every single feeling that our child is feeling. And we're just in a cycle, in a pattern of wallowing in emotion and feelings for children. And they don't really know what we need from them. So anxiety is driving the parenting bus. Parents are afraid of harming their kids emotionally, and they're afraid of repeating their parents' mistakes, and they're being labeled too strict. But this anxiety has fueled a new micromanaging and helicopter. That's where the helicopter came from. This micromanaging of feelings and thoughts and ideas, and rescuing our kids when they need to figure things out on their own, and the over talking and the avoiding discomfort. We can't always cushion the blow of our children's life. They've got to feel experiences and work through them. This dynamic shows up clearly in the anxious generation. Anxious parents do not raise calmer kids. They raise more anxious ones. And we've certainly seen that play out in schools and workplaces and through social interactions these days. What parents were promised were calm kids and less conflict and better behavior through understanding. But what we actually got was burned out as a parent, always explaining, always needing to be showing up with endless patience. We got guilt. We got a lot of self-doubt in ourselves as parents. And we got kids who struggled with frustration and disappointment and hearing no, contributing without being asked. These just became non-existent in our families.
Yeah, you mentioned the Anxious Generation book, which I think is amazing. I read it. Our school district actually recommended it because they had all the teachers read it, just to kind of get a better understanding. And I loved it. It was written by a social psychologist, which I found very interesting. And one of the things that was talked about in that book was like the term overparenting. I'm not sure if he coined the term, but I have been hearing it more in other parenting worlds. People are starting to use that. And we've talked about that like here on the podcast as well. Overparenting, micromanaging, getting super involved. And I have to admit, when I first read that, I was totally offended. I was like, what do you mean? And then I just had to keep pushing through. And then after that initial reaction, really take a step back and kind of look at things and assess and see where you are overparenting. And I think that's always a great thing to do. And it's just like you said, I think a lot of the fear and anxiety comes from, not wanting the same mistakes your parents made. But the author also points out that overparenting actually also causes anxiety. So we're just fueling the fire if we're doing any of those things. And it makes us as parents doubt themselves, just like you mentioned. So I thought that was quite an interesting connection. I have, ever since I read the book, I've noticed, and when I get in overparenting mode, it's a little easier to assess, and then I can take a step back. But I do notice that there is a connection between that overparenting and anxiety. So interesting. I was wondering from your perspective, with parents who might be realizing that they've tried all these approaches, they've tried the parenting trends and methods, and maybe they've strung from one extreme to the other. How do you recommend parents go about striking a better balance?
Well, going back to this overparenting idea, in the book that I wrote, Secrets to Parenting Without Giving a Fuck, I do talk a lot about the detachment idea, that intentional detachment. So if we've been trained, if our parenting background was that we were kind of put in a corner, told to shut up, stop crying. So we have overcompensated. The pendulum has swung, and that's what happens. Everything in life is cyclical. But this idea of this healthy detachment is such a great way to kind of look at it. We don't have to swing from one extreme to the other. We don't have to, cling to the latest trend. There's a balanced way to approach parenting that includes both empathy and understanding and still holds up long term with zero buyer's remorse. And it's called leadership parenting. And that's what I teach. That's what I train. That's what I write about. That's what I talk about. And that's really what Ask Mom Parenting podcast is about. Helping parents discover that healthy detachment, the when do I toe the line? When do I understand? When do I hold the boundary? So it's called leadership parenting. And this is where we're going to put our business hat on. And this is where we start to get taken seriously, but we still have fun. I like to say that running a home is like running a business. It's like any leader, anywhere that you work in the workplace. We train first, and then we set clear standards, and then we follow through. We cannot take the behavior personally or emotionally. We're not having endless meetings about feelings, right? You don't have that in the workplace, and we don't need to have that in the culture of our home as parents. We can strike that balance. We're changing the culture of our home from constant negotiation to cooperation, and going from repeating ourselves to being listened to. Here's how we're going to do it. We'll talk about that coming up here. Feelings do matter, but they don't run the house. Okay. We can validate our child's emotion without removing every discomfort. We can teach that frustration tolerance is a skill. It's not a trauma. Surviving hard moments builds responsible people, and we don't get that by avoiding them. So what is leadership-driven parenting? And how does this replace the trend of gentle parenting? What leadership parenting isn't is it's not authoritative, it's not punitive, it's not cold, but it is calm, clear, confident, and sustainable. What changes when a parent uses leadership parenting? So we are doing a lot less explaining. We're doing a lot fewer negotiations, especially when the kids are young. Okay. They just need our training and our direction. We're giving a more clear cause and effect, expectations plus accountability, where we become partners with our kids. And again, that's the business reference, partnership. And we base the partnership and the level of interaction and explanation on the age of what the kid is capable of understanding. So I'm going to give you a quick gentle parenting leadership example. And this is just how it can play out. I know when I was learning all of this, I needed examples. So say it's morning, and this is a common situation. I have a lot of parents between like 4 and 6 years old. Kids really tend to sort of to push the limits. And, 5 is like a master age for especially boys. But anyway, it's morning, you're trying to get out the door and you spent 5, maybe 10 minutes validating your child's feelings about putting on their shoes. You've offered choices, you've stayed calm, and now you're late. You're holding in your frustration and your child is running the show. He's still barefoot, he's melting down, and you're nowhere near leaving the house. Does this sound familiar? Because I know we've all been there. And in that moment, you actually have two choices. You can keep validating and pleading with a child who's been handed the authority because he knows you're not leaving until the shoes are on. You can stay stuck in the power struggle, or you can lead. Leadership sounds like this. At breakfast, there's a training. You simply say this kid anywhere from 4 to 8, maybe 7, there's training involved. We're leaving in 15 minutes. Your shoes go on after breakfast. Okay. 15 minutes later, you grab your coat in your bag and you say, we're leaving, shoes on. That's it. Same request and no extra words. If the shoes aren't on, you leave because you said you would. Action, no more explanation is needed. When I was trying to get out the door with 4 kids, 3 at the same age, I lived this firsthand. It was very frustrating. A lot of yelling was going on. And when I was learning all of this new information, as I was reading and taking classes, I had to be honest with myself. I had to really admit it takes a moment of self-awareness to go, yep, I am yelling and I am repeating and nothing is changing. So once you get to the point where you're really frustrated and you're pissed off that their shoes aren't on and you've told them over and over, that is the point of readiness for you to go, what else works? Well, this works. So when you leave the breakfast table and you say, bag in hand, we're leaving. I told you 15 minutes ago, you don't have to over explain. You don't have to over correct, just simply action. Yes, the first time you do this, there's going to be screaming in the car. And yes, your child will arrive to school with no shoes on. Yes. Yes, there will be a full-blown meltdown while every nerve of your body is on fire. But fast forward this behavior to 15 years old, right? We don't want that. So being ready for the blow up does help. All right. It makes it easier, but you know that you're holding the boundary. And I would much rather have the stakes at 4 and 5 than at 15 and 16. I would rather set the tone for training and expectations as early as possible so I can get the behavior change. All you have to say is when the meltdown stops and he calms down, you simply say, I'm sorry you didn't get your shoes on in time. Maybe tomorrow you can make it happen. And that is it. He will either, have gotten the shoes on at the last second when you leave on time, or he shows up in the car without the shoes on. I promise you that, this one sentence holds accountability. It holds behavior ownership. And it's a clear path forward. And this is how kids learn to take us seriously, not through more talking, more pleading, more negotiation, but through consistency and action. I promise you this scenario will only have to play out once or twice, okay? Before kids learn that you mean what you say. It's action, not words. Short, calm, and done. A child at 4 and 5 does not need more explanation and more pleading because, let's be honest, right? Back it up. It didn't work. So what does work? Just this calm leadership. I'm not yelling. I'm simply holding you accountable to my words.
Those are some great examples. some great concrete examples of what you're talking about, because I agree. I think examples are the easiest way to kind of see where does all this parenting stuff, these new, things that we're learning, how can they fit into my everyday life? I think it's really important to have examples and to know, how can I actually use this? So I'm thinking of though, for parents who this might be a new concept or a new approach to try. Some parents might be listening, feeling torn, like, oh, I want to calm her home, but I'm not really sure if I can do this. Maybe there's some resistance there about trying this new approach. So what would you say to anybody out there who, might be sitting with some discomfort about trying an approach like this?
That is like the perfect question. I'm so used to, parenting like this and teaching parents. Sometimes I forget how it felt when I first started doing it. It was definitely a big leap. It was a big change. But again, I've mentioned in earlier podcasts, my training is in Montessori. So it's all about self-accountability. It's all about personal responsibility, accountability, and kids are adults in training. So that is the perfect question. Yes, it's very, very upsetting when your kid is throwing a tantrum because they really is a bid for control. So that's why we call it a power struggle. How do we nip that in the bud by staying calm and not yelling? It's by training up front, and it's by saying a few simple words and then backing that up with what you said you were going to do. So making this shift without that back end guilt is how you normalize the resistance. So it does feel uncomfortable at first. You may worry I'm being too strict. Like the saying is that things get worse before it gets better. I mean, that's like with everything when you're making real change, things do get worse before they get better. And this does not mean that you're doing it wrong. Whenever you're making any kind of shift with your behavior and the way that you're showing up with your kids, they're going to notice and they're going to push back because they want to know whether you mean it. So this is why it's very important to remember we have a training conversation. We make the declaration of like how it's going to go down, and then it needs to go down that way. And that way your child knows tomorrow, ooh, they mean it. They're leaving. No matter what I do, no matter how much I scream, no matter how much I have a tantrum, no matter how much I try to hold them hostage that I can't wear my shoes at school. Like, again, the stakes are so low at 4 and 5 and 6. We don't want this replaying when they're preteens. And this is what parents today that I'm coaching and that are in my workshops are with these preteens and these teens and wondering, where did I go wrong? The negotiation and the pleading and all of that is not working for parents now. So if we can back this up when they're younger, this is what's effective. So there's some ways to transition from that gentle parenting to leadership, and it's more of a results-based parenting style. And the number one mantra, if you're looking to kind of dial it back and you recognize yourself in this topic, the number one mantra is action, not words. So it's the antidote to gentle parenting, and it's your road to being credible and trustworthy with your kids. Because remember, if you are able to negotiate with a child, they don't trust that you know what you're doing. And that leads to a breakdown in trust and credibility with them. They're not wondering like, well, she's wishy-washy or she changes her mind. There's a leadership gap in the home. And if you want kids' behavior to take you seriously and to do what you're asking and to build in that cooperation, this is the way through that. Remember when we talked earlier about that long game parenting, the zoom out to the fact that you're, raising an adult in training. Do I want a 25-year-old who needs and expects rescue and who expects to be handled gently? The workplace doesn't want it. And I know I don't want it as a parent when my kids have been grown. Or do you want to be one that adapts and recovers and takes responsibility? We're not raising a child. We're training an adult. We always have to remember that, even at any age. This little cute little being, it's like a puppy, super cute, but we don't want a big dog jumping up on us and not coming back when we call them and so forth. It's the same philosophy. So keeping the big picture in mind as you execute your new tone, expect resistance. That's how you know that it's working. The first 1 to 2 times that you stop over-explaining, your child's going to push back harder. It's going to happen for sure. Depends on how long they've gotten used to you breaking your rules, right? So accountability is painful for both of you. But if you've decided that you're done not being listened to, then this is worth it. It means when your kids push back that the rules have just changed and your child is testing to see if you really mean it this time. Kids won't fight consistent clarity because they grow to depend on you and your word, but they will fight your inconsistency and your confusion. With a stabilized system, kids feel less unsure. So another example shift about action, not words. This is for the younger kids. Again, if you're looking to bake this training into the younger kids and get the results that you're looking for when a child does what you ask, another common question that parents ask me in my workshops is like, picking up toys, for example. One of the ways to take this leadership shift and apply this training and consistency, this antidote to the gentle parenting, to the example of picking up toys is super simple. The kids, the playroom is a mess, or wherever they were playing is a mess. They've left their toys all over the place. You ask them to pick up the toys, they don't do it. You simply say, whatever doesn't get picked up takes a break. You're not having access to it. Well, they're going to test it. They walk away, they go find something else. Kids have the attention span of a lightning bolt, and they go and they don't get it done. So you just quietly, without fanfare, without over explanation, you simply just take their toys and what we did is we put it up on the fireplace mantle because they couldn't reach it, but they could see it. Then they wonder, why are my toys up there? Oh, well, remember we talked about you picking up your toys and that whatever didn't get picked up just gets taken away for a while. You get a break on those things. And, it doesn't take long for the kids to understand that, oh, she meant business. She meant that I needed to pick them up because now I've lost access to whatever I was playing with. And this can go on. And, you can rotate this. They see it up there. They want it back. They might test you for a little bit, act like they don't care. But it's the idea of the action, not words. I said it. I meant it. And here's my action. I'm not yelling. I'm not over explaining. I'm simply just telling you what's going to happen. And then it happens. I can even remember a few things that, my kids would leave out, and they would come home from school and they'd be like, why is my doll up on the mantle? And we lost access to it for a little bit until we learn how to pick up our toys. So when we want to get our toys back, we pick up the ones that we have left. It works beautifully. It might take a little bit of time, but again, action, not words, is what your kids come to depend on. And that is how parents achieve accountability and cooperation in kids who listen. So understanding that I'm going to take the rose-colored glasses off and go, this sounds hard, but is what you're doing working? And I know that from my workshops that this repeated constant pleading and communication does not work for these younger kids. They just need some action. Consequences aren't mean. It's how the world works. Kids will learn faster when an outcome is consistent and boring to them. It's not emotional and dramatic with yelling and punishment and so forth. There's no drama that needs to happen. I say it and then I back it up with action. Our job isn't to be liked in the moment by our child. It's to be trusted long term. So if you're looking to make the shift, here's some practical first moves that can work. Notice where you're drained and constantly repeating yourself with a zero change. So step back, look at your day and figure out, where am I fighting these kids the most? And where can I turn a request into a training opportunity with action, not words? And where can I back up my boundary with action? So pick one boundary and hold it consistently. Use fewer words and back it up with action. Prepare ahead what the consequence can be. And don't allow yourself to be invited into the power struggle, because that's what's happening. They are testing the limits. They don't need to roll around in their feelings at these young ages. They just want to know what the boundary is and what the expectation is. They're inviting you into the power struggle. It's your job to have that leadership in your home and know how to sidestep it. And this is how you'll get there. You will sidestep most power struggles with all of these leadership methods. Allow your kids to feel disappointed without fixing it. It just is. It's just, the disappointment's just hanging heavy in the air. It just is. How are you going to solve that, right? Trust your kids that they want you to be in charge. It's their safety net when you hold a boundary. And then also always keep the big picture, the long game in mind. Leadership parenting works because it's sustainable for parents. There's not a lot of draining. It's not over explaining. It's not emotionally trying for us because I have a training moment, I say the boundary, and then I back it up. It's real simple. I don't need to yell and I don't need to keep over explaining. It moves their learning ahead and it doesn't keep you stuck in the reactionary, kid phase where we're always reacting and it's this vicious cycle. It aligns with child development and it builds independence and responsibility, resilience, and contribution in the home. All the things that parents, when they show up to my workshops, always say they want in a child and they don't know how to get there. And I'm handing this to you on a silver platter. Worked with 4 kids, worked with countless hundreds of parents that I've worked with. We got to get past the fact that it might feel a little uncomfortable, but I'm telling you, it works. Our final thoughts for today would be that, parenting trends do come and go. We were raised with, way back in the day, my parents read Dr. Spock. It's just every generation has their thing. Good leadership, though, always endures, like it does in corporations, like it does in, small businesses. Leadership will always win the day when it's good leadership. Kids never needed a perfectly emotionally regulated parent. They never needed that from us. They need a balanced and consistent parent showing up. So we don't want to focus on raising kids who feel good in every moment. We're raising adults who can handle life in the real world. That's our job. When parenting turns to endless explaining and constant validating, the child's growth stalls and the world won't rearrange itself to keep your child comfortable. All right. Leadership at home will prepare them for real life, and it gives them the confidence to handle what will come at them through life's experiences. If you've listened all the way to the end, if you could do me a favor and subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your streaming podcasts and leave a review or comment, it really helps us get our parenting movement off the ground for leadership parenting. You can also share with a fellow parent if you feel compelled. And, I'd be so grateful. We work really hard to put the content together and help move the needle on parenting, help parents solve problems in their home, and, make parenting easier. So if you'd be willing, that would be great. We appreciate you listening and thank you. Happy parenting. If today's episode helped you in any small way, it would mean so much if you supported us and hit follow so you never miss what's next. And if you have a quick moment, leaving a rating and review helps this podcast reach more parents who need this support too. You can also connect with me on Instagram or Facebook. I would love to meet you over there. You'll find me at Ask Mom Parenting on both platforms. Thank you so much for listening to the Ask Mom Parenting podcast with Sue Donnellan. I'll see you next time, and happy parenting.